Welcome, everybody. Stephanie Brown here from Intelligent Construction Opportunities. Intelligent Construction Opportunities helps companies to source, select, and implement their technologies. The reason I do these live streams is I feel it's really vital that we connect the gaps sometimes between construction professionals and the technology we design for them. And today's guest is Chris Ricker from mypaintbuckets.com. Welcome, Chris.
Hi, Stephanie. Thanks for having me. And before we get started, I just want to say it's my first time seeing your introduction video.
Yeah.
That was awesome. That was my big smile coming in. That was super cool.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I'm working on some other things in the background, as we all are, and it's an evolution. But I feel, you got to kind of bring your personality to the table, and sometimes by comics, that's my best way of doing it.
Well, I'm super jelly. I think my introduction video is just my mug here. So that was awesome.
Well, it's a good mug at that. Let's get started, and if you can share with people your background, what brought you to mypaintbuckets.com. I know you've got a partner, and you share and let people know what you're about.
Yeah, sure. So I'll take the long-winded approach on this one because it's pretty interesting on how my partner, my co-founder Joe Datillo, and I kind of got here. So that long-winded approach, honestly, it's a combination of decades of experience that kind of brought us to the idea. So, it started really back in high school. I was lucky enough, I attended high school here in Orlando, Florida, and I started taking web design classes, I think my junior year of high school. So at that time, I just started to kind of develop an appreciation and an interest in technology. At that time, my grades weren't so good, so I had to find something else to do post high school. So I joined the Air Force right out of high school and found my way into the career field space operations. So for those who don't know what space operations is, that's what at that time it was a derivative of the U.S. Air Force, but is now the U.S. Space Force. So I spent roughly 20 years both on active duty and inactive duty working with just cutting edge projects, a lot of fun, super interesting and sometimes classified projects. But again, it just kind of helped me, grow that appreciation and that understanding of tech. But what does that mean is, it wasn't necessarily for me. Wanted to do something different. So I left the military and found my way into the construction industry. And I felt, at that time, I was like, I think it'd be a good way to take my military, the hard experiences, leadership, management, things like that, applying to the construction industry. And I joined a paint company. And I think day one is when I realized, oh my gosh, where is all the technology at? I remember sitting there. So it was my father-in-law's paint company. And Pops said, hey, we're going to start your training today. I said, okay, cool. And I said, what are we doing? He's like, here's your yellow notepad. Start building the schedule. And I was like, what? What do you mean? Like we could use like Google. We can use Outlook. I mean, there's Excel spreadsheets, whatever. I mean, there's got to be 10 other ways we can build our schedule, not just through a yellow notepad. And then he just kind of looked at me and was like, no, like this is how we do it. And so we took out a slide rule and we made lines and we started to build the schedule. And it worked for Monday and it fell apart by 12 o'clock that afternoon. So that was kind of the, where does my paint buckets come in? So it really started back in 2016. I started to kind of, as more of the reins of that paint company were bestowed upon me, I started to build digital processes. And so that's a fancy way of saying I started with Excel spreadsheets, Microsoft Outlook templates, Microsoft Word, and I just started to play around. I started to try things like, okay, let me build a schedule this way. Let me build a paint order form template this way. Does it work in Outlook? Can I send it to a paint store? Can I send it to my subcontractors, employees, things like that? Eventually, I outgrew all that, and so Joe and I, we crossed paths again. So I should also caveat Joe. Joe and I were in the Air Force together, and so he, I'll save his introductions for another date and time. But Joe is an amazing person. Really forward leaning back in the early 2000s, tried to digitize a lot of processes on the Air Force side. But I reached out to him. I said, hey, Joe, I got an idea. Here's what I'm thinking. Idea is called My Paint Buckets. I think we can digitize the paint industry. And without question, he said, yep, let's do it. What are you thinking? And so then I took all my spreadsheets and out templates, and we started digitizing them into what My Paint Buckets is today. And so what is that? My Paint Buckets is it's an evolution of very basic digital processes that have turned into now a software as a service.
Wow. Wow. That's quite the background and quite the evolution. I mean, that's the entrepreneur at heart, right? Opportunity and do something about it. I want to give a quick shout out to the one and only Jesse Hernandez, who
Hey, Jesse.
is a lot of the glue and a lot of the, I would say, the forerunner in all of what we do now online. So thanks for, hopping on and taking a listen, Jesse. So, Chris, I mean, it's really interesting that you have that kind of a background in terms of what you do. Who is the user? And I know you talk a lot about last mile. So, like, it's one thing to build an application. It's another thing to get very specific about who is going to use it.
Sure. Yeah. So it's a great question, Stephanie. So what I'm going to do is there's actually two that we would consider our users, but I'm going to start with the obvious one, which is your painting contractor. So more specifically, that's a small, maybe to medium sized business. That doesn't mean we can't support large businesses, but the reason why we say small to medium is those are the ones that need, one, help the most, and two, have the opportunity for scale. So again, that's what we deliver is digital processes that give you that opportunity to grow your business, just beyond your
So what do
community
those
or
numbers
geographic area.
mean? Let's talk about scale,
Sure.
because oftentimes people throw around SMB, mid-market.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what does it mean to the residential painting world?
Yeah, so I mean, our primary user, as far as annual revenue goes, is somewhere in the ballpark between $3 and $7 million. I've had some conversations with painters who do much more than that at scale, like across our state. So they're somewhere between the 12 to maybe $20 million range. But what's interesting is, like I said, is both are either using something like My Paint Buckets, or they're still using, where I was back in 2016, some form of digital process, but not the full efficiency that something like My Paint Buckets can deliver.
So what does My Paint Buckets do differently from that fragmented system, even if you're using Google Docs or whatever?
Yeah. So again, awesome question. We're turnkey is what we like to say, right? Meaning, if you've got a contract with a national home builder, then our processes are aligned with, I would debate probably all of them, but at least the 80% that I've had the opportunity to work with. And so, again, so if you have that contract, I mean, you create an account, you're off and running. You're going to be aligned with what they're going to do or how they operate. In most cases, you're probably going to move faster than them. Additionally, we're also aligned with how the suppliers operate. So, for example, like if you step into like the supply management side of what My Paint Buckets offers, we put a lot of effort into making sure that like how our order forms are created and sent to those suppliers, that the suppliers, it's one thing for you to be able to read them, that's great. But if your supplier can't read them and you're creating, problems for them, then once again, you're creating a bottleneck. So the bottom line there is those order forms that are sent to the suppliers, I mean, they're able to take that information and create your orders and manage your supplies with higher efficiencies and without, or hopefully without, any errors.
So basically, you're talking the Sherwin-Williams of the world and the Behr Paints of the world, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
We've created like, we know it boils down to the painter, right? Every painter is going to work with a different supplier. So we didn't pigeonhole ourselves to a single supplier. What does that mean is we've kept our software flexible. So if you work with Sherwin-Williams, if you work with PPG Paint, if you work with Behr Paint, Spectrum Paint, Florida Paint, depending on where you are, it's easy. So all we have to do is we give the painter that ability to input whoever they work with, and it's that simple. It's just a name.
Well, so here's Jesse's 2 cents, of course. So I can't write my list in sheetrock anymore.
Sorry, Jesse. Yeah. Pops might like that, but not anymore.
Well, I mean, this is the thing. So it's curious. I mean, I'm assuming, you know, the market is big enough for you to keep growing what you're doing and the features and sort of things that you're providing people for. But can we sort of start to break down what does that look like in terms of those features? What are you actually giving somebody in a workflow that, quite frankly, isn't going to interrupt the, I'll call it, Jesse, the au natural style, having written this list out on a piece of sheetrock,
Sure.
that is making it so it's just, it should be easier. I'm assuming it's easier.
Yeah, so again, awesome question, right? And so, Joe and I have spent probably an incredible amount of time, when we started to build this out, one of the things we wanted to respect is, listen, I mean, I'm sitting here with a notebook, right? Like, and I still write an incredible amount. There's a lot of power in still being able to write and put down information in a notebook. So what does that mean is we wanted to go, okay, what is the stuff that we should be writing down, and what is the stuff that we shouldn't be writing down? And so the wag that I took there was like, all right, well, what's the 80% of headaches and information that I shouldn't be writing down, and not only should I have, like, should be personal to me, but that should be broadcasted to to the users or the subcontractors or the employees at scale. And so that's where we began. And so I'm if you're interested, I'm happy to share some of that feature
Absolutely.
there.
If you got something, yes, if we can show as well as tell, it's always better.
Yeah,
So,
perfect.
I think that's good. You find what you have to, and I'll make sure, we get it up here. So, I have a little bit of a side question for you, and that
Sure.
is, and I'm asking the audience too, like if you had to paint your dream house and you only could choose 3 colors, what would that look like?
Oh man. Okay, so clarification question. Am I still living in Florida, or where
Yep,
does the
you're
climate
living
of my
wherever you think you should be living in that dream house.
All right, perfect. So I am definitely not going to move from Florida. I'm going to stay beachside because my wife and I are still thawing out from our 5 years of living in Colorado. So my colors are going to be exterior body is going to be some form of alabaster white with a satin finish. The trim is going to be a slightly less shade of white, or sorry, excuse me, slightly darker shade of white, and then my door is going to be some form of green. And I go with white and no gray, especially on the interior, because I can tell you right now, some of the biggest headaches I had from my time in the field was getting the warranty calls of, like, we have light touch-ups at lot whatever, and I would pull up my color and I would see some form of gray, and I would just, like, oh my gosh, there's no touch-up there. I'm going to have to go corner to corner. There's 2 more hours out of the day.
Wow. But it sounds pretty though. I mean, I have to say I am an HGTV junkie myself, and I
Yeah.
always notice how the front door is the one pop of color, right?
Oh, you gotta have it. So
Yeah.
Stephanie, guess what color my house is? It's white with some off shades of white and a very nice green door.
Beautiful. Very Florida. Very Florida.
Very.
All right, let's move on to what our little bit of a show and tell here is in terms of what we were talking about. You can
Yeah,
pick.
so I guess sure. So to, I guess, circle back to where we started, right? Is it's probably easier to start with, what is the first problem that I wanted to solve with technology, and that problem being is I needed to get information out to my subcontractors, my employees, and faster, and just needed it more, or excuse me, I needed it available at all times. So this is our dev environment. So just bear with me if there's any hiccups here. So what you see here is this is just our standard splash page. The key here is can this work for any painter? So for example, if a painter was in commercial painting, or if it was your neighborhood painter who was doing repaints, absolutely. But just to bin the conversation, we've developed our processes for speed, right? And so there's some things that Joe and I discussed and said, since we're building for speed, aka that new residential construction community, then we're going to sacrifice some wants in the aspect of getting other wants out there. In this case, like information. So I digress. Back to the question is what problem am I solving? Is the first one. I had to stop phone calls, and so I had to get information out there. And so this is what we call the cover sheet. This is it'll continue to grow as features grow with it. But this is in essence the foundation of that project, right? When I was in the field and managing the paint company, I found and I sat down one day, actually for a couple of days, and I started to like log my phone calls, right? And I wanted to see like what question. Like I knew I was getting hundreds of phone calls every day. I just wasn't entirely certain what questions I was getting. So I started to realize I was like, well, my questions were, my subcontractor calling me and asking me about what is the color on this lot, what is the address for this project, how many square feet is that project, what color is the front door, and so I started like I looked and I was like, oh my gosh, like 50% of my phone calls are just answering rudimentary questions. Like I've got to get this information out to my users, or sorry, to my subcontractors and to my employees all the time. And so I, again, as we discussed, I started to do some really clumsy ways of doing that. Like, for example, using like, Dropbox, if I don't know if people still use Dropbox, but,
Sure.
I share the file. Yeah. Can I share the file with them? And then I think right around that time is when the Microsoft, there's OneDrive started to come out. And so that made things a little more interesting. But again, my concern there was spillage, right? Like obviously I wanted to protect my project and the information as the company or the business owner, but I needed to get it out to my subcontractors, but I also wanted to protect, one community from a different community, just because again, there might be some financials there, or scale there that, again, I didn't want to create strife amongst the subcontractors. So long-winded way of saying, here's the cover sheet. It's a 3-step wizard. So we reduced our admin costs, our admin time. Originally, this was done on a spreadsheet. So each cover sheet, as I dug through the design sheets that were provided to me, it took me roughly 8 to 10 minutes. If I was moving fast enough, I could find the information. Now we've cut it down to just a few minutes and a few clicks. We try to stick to a 3-step process for everything that we do. That's Joe and I's
military. Good. That must be music to Jesse's ears. One of the first times Jesse and I talked about this, he said, if I can't do it in 3 clicks, I'm going to throw the thing down. So
and
on you.
Jesse is definitely wise to say that, and that's some of the benefits that Joe and I got in the military is they're exceptional at taking someone from with a 4-year degree to just out of high school and getting them to a level that everyone can operate together. And so yes, that's again wise. That's exactly what Joe and I have done, is we kept everything to 3 steps. So as you can see, I'm gonna as we click through it, it's as simple as adding exactly what you need. It's pretty straightforward. The other piece that we wanted to keep in mind was, there's obviously, and we see it all over on LinkedIn and in conversation, right? The construction industry is kind of at an interesting inflection point, right? We still have, the current generation, and then we have the younger generation moving in. And so what does that mean is, as I said to Joe, we've got to be able, to target what we have now, meaning we've got to keep simplicity paramount. So that's our, one of our mantras as we do development is, when we start to roll out features or we have questions on like, hey, what is, should we roll it out? Like, does this look and feel right? My response is always is it easy enough and intuitively enough to operate? And if it's not, meaning if we start to think like, if the words come out of our mouth, like maybe we can just train the user, too complicated, then we need to reduce it and make it simple. So that's our goal. 3 steps, 1 tap, no training. And if we're able to meet that, then we think we're on the right track.
So what's your onboarding like? And I like the fact that you're eliminating the training. I mean, too often, there's very, very wide gaps and nuance between onboarding, integration, and training. And those things are not the same thing all at the same time. They're different, and yet somehow they all have to align. So
sure.
what's your onboarding process? If you can describe that, or if there's anything to show, but if you can describe it, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, at the end of the day, you'll never get away. There's always some level of training, or to your point, like onboarding that's required. Again, what is our vision still is to make it so simple and so autonomous that it's you just tell My Paint Buckets what you need or who you work with, and it's that simple. You're off and running. But more specifically, what is onboarding like? I mean, it's as easy as creating an account, and then we get the email, and then we sit down with you and just literally put in the companies you work with, meaning the suppliers and the builders, and I mean, you're off and running in 5 minutes. There's a
So
couple,
how do you match up fields? You have to. Is there any uploading of Excel spreadsheets because maybe that's what they're currently using, or it's literally take your process, get rid of that process, and start this process?
Yep, that's exactly it. Now, I mean, there's lessons learned in that, right? Like, depending on how big your business is, I would sit down and discuss, like, where are you operating at? Are you operating in just one community, or you're operating in 20 different communities, or you're operating with 5 different builders, and are you across the state? Because there's definitely going to be some like, for example, when we started to roll, like I'll never forget, like, our first day of rolling out, just the cover sheets, right? Like, so I should caveat, like, my wife is the powerhouse. She's the paint owner. She runs her own paint company. So we're lucky enough to have, our test user, if you will. So when we roll out new features, we roll them into her company. And then we start to gather those lessons learned. Yeah. And then we tweak. So we're able to make a really polished
Realistic
product. To roll it up.
It's realistic all the time. It's great.
Exactly. But like I said, the first time I remember her going, she as she was transitioning from the Dropbox OneDrive era into the My Paint Bucket era, she was like, how do I do I start building my cover sheets now, and how do I get that to paint company ABC? And so there was, and you start to find some edge details, right? But the point there is there's some ways that that we when we onboard, we take some approaches to minimize, like, any unforeseen scale inefficiencies, right? Like, so I'm just trying to think of an example. Sorry, I'm going back like 3 years, 4 years in my head now, but like, hey, this person didn't get the information. Why? Like, oh, okay. Or you have to nudge your organization sometimes into the new process. So it's a graceful transition, if that makes sense. So like I said, we work with the companies to gracefully transition them into the My Paint Buckets ecosystem.
Well, I mean, it sounds like, I mean, the fact that you've got a testing field to do this in is awesome and kind of exceptional. That I'll say that's unfettered. There's no side agenda or anything else to it. So I think you're very fortunate. And I think also when I look at your dashboard, it looks, I mean, it has to be simple. It just has to be so intuitive. Particularly if you're going to tell, Painter X to get rid of the system, whatever that is now. So
yeah, exactly. And
yeah, go ahead.
And so that going back to, like, the why here, right? Like, the goal here was reduce my phone calls on just everyday information, right? And so then, after we rolled this out, and we rolled it out at scale, and we were able to, transition the company, so now everyone is operating on it. I mean, phone calls were cut in half, at least on the the rudimentary information front. So it gave me, as a owner operator, the ability to just, okay, now I can focus my attention on more important things, like renegotiating costs with a home builder, or renegotiating costs with suppliers, or giving my attention to construction managers, things like that.
So I'm curious. So if we can kind of summarize a little bit, while we're trying to, we're sort of working toward a little over our halfway point today. If My Paint Buckets had a team of superheroes, what would they be in terms of the features? What would your superhero features be?
Oh man, foresight. Like, I think at the end of the day, every construction owner, any construction professional, that's a better word. So, whether you're a construction manager, trade partner, business owner, everyone wants to be able to look into the future and see what their problems are. So is that Professor X maybe from the X-Men? Did he have foresight? I know he had at least mind reading capabilities. So maybe that's a secondary one. So if I
Yeah.
had to pick like at least one foresight and then mind reading, again, I'd love to get into that was kind of the other thing as I was running the paint company, building relationships was huge, right? So if I could understand what the likes and dislikes are of not just my construction manager but their company as a whole, that would give me some leverage over my competition. So I
Well,
think
I
those
mean,
are the
at the
two
end
I
of the
would
day,
pick.
yeah, at the end of the day, they're trying to save money or make money. I mean,
Exactly.
and as I learned a long time ago, if you follow the money, you're going to get to the solution.
Hmm.
Because why is anybody doing what they're doing? Professionally speaking, I mean, God bless them if they love what they're doing, but very few people are going to work being that the primary goal.
Yeah, no, and it's the fact of the matter, right? I think at the end of the day, the other thing too is and it's great to see it. Like, if you get too money focused, then sometimes your product suffers, right? And so especially, and you can see that in construction. If you're doing things for rock bottom prices, then you're probably going to cut corners. So the other thing is I think it's important to follow the money, but also deliver efficiencies where you can maybe reduce costs, but without sacrificing the quality of the product that you're operating in.
Yeah, and I would also say follow the reality.
Hmm.
I just did a live stream earlier in the week, and Kip Ivey said something that really stuck with me. Basically reiterating the bid process. If you're going to take a bid, you're not going to go to the lowest, you're not going to go to the highest, you're going to stay in the middle, because the middle is probably more representative of the truer reality of
Sure.
what can happen in any minute, on any day, on any construction site. So I want to talk a little bit about your integrations. Are there things that you have found your users would need to have integrated, and what does that look like?
Yeah, again, love the question, Stephanie. That is, that's our main focus. Joe and I's main focus right now is you mentioned it. We're focused on that last mile of construction, right? And so what does that mean? It's a fancy way of saying, we're looking at where dollars, supplies, people, priorities, and some in our industry, homeowners, all aggressively intersect, right? Meaning you've got short time frames, you've got to get out there, execute your task, and collect money where needed, all without sacrificing again the quality, right? And so what does that mean is we've air gapped a lot of, or we created air gap efficiencies, right? In the case like our orders, right? We're not integrated. We'd like to integrate with suppliers because at the end of the day, being able to connect, in this case with like suppliers, I mean, we're creating a very efficient digital process, not just from painter on the project, but supplies, painters, all the way through the project. So again, what does that mean? I'll share my screen just as this, so I can tie the story together.
Good, good, good.
And so this was kind of part two of what Joe and I started to work on was being able to create digital paint orders. So when you start to look at, to your point, like what does integration look like for us? Is we'd like to integrate with the larger supplier industry, Sherwin-Williams, PPG Paint, whoever the suppliers are that have some type of in-store technology managing their processes, because as our painters come in and they start to build their orders, it takes me 30 seconds, right? Air gap, it works great. I can move faster than most cases, if not all cases, than our suppliers. By simply, how many clicks was that? I'll ask Jesse if he's keeping count. But far less than what most are offering. But I mean, that's it. It took me, what is that? In conversation, less than 30 seconds to send a paint order. and then I can come back and recall it as needed. But the point there is the inefficiency now is I'm moving faster than the supplier. So if I was able to integrate with a supplier, the efficiencies I gain there, for example, is I can now we can now seamlessly communicate amongst each other, meaning I can be notified, yep, they got my order. They can now, one click let me know when the order has been processed, when it's out for delivery. And so now I can start managing my labor better, right? Like, because some of the problem sets that we run into now is, okay, I've got a task on the schedule, exterior paint, lot 35. I send a crew out there, and the first phone call I get now is, going back to the original problem sets, is the phone calls come in as, where's my paint? And so, okay, give me a second. Pick up the phone. Where's my paint? It's out for delivery. When's it going to get there? Somebody, it's like the internet cable, right? Sometime between 8 and 12. So that's a pretty broad window of having, my paint crews or painters sitting on a site waiting for supplies. So if I know when my supplies are going to be on the project, then I could send my crews to other projects, so I can manage my labor force more efficiently. And so again, that all translates to profits, honestly, on both sides, not just for the painter, but the supplier. They're finding they're going to gain efficiencies in all this. And so we do have that built. I'm going to keep that in my little hip pocket, if you don't mind, Stephanie. But I am absolutely happy to demonstrate our vendor management process and what that delivers to them.
Well, that would be helpful, in perhaps a future live stream, just to, because the bottom line is, I called today's live stream Power to the Painter. We've just got to get better at, I think, very specifically serving specific trades and how they work, and not just throwing everything into one basket as though everybody runs one project in one particular way. It just isn't. We can't stay competitive that way. We all have we all have to, in any business, have your so-called overplayed secret sauce. But the truth is, you just do, and that's called capitalism. And so you have to respect that. But as creators of software and technologies, you really have to get yourself literally in the paint buckets and the paint brushes and the shoes of people using your particular application. So good for you. You got your wife with a paint company, is what I can say. That to me, that's part of the secret sauce right there.
It's well said.
When you talk about integrations, can you sort of call out, like, when I'm talking about integrations, are we integrating with emails? Are we integrating with, can you sort of call out other platforms that you're being able to talk to?
Yeah. So again, we're standalone, but like, no, if you called us out, or excuse me, if you asked that more, tactical question about, the email side of it, right? Like we obviously are integrated in that aspect, meaning when you saw that notify vendor, when I click that, like we're able to autonomously create an order, send an order, and that hits the inbox of whatever that supplier's store is on record.
Outlook and Gmail is all I'm trying to say,
Yep.
from a platform to platform perspective.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. So exactly. We do have a high-end email server. Again, the goal there is to create the autonomy within the network, so you're not having to. And I think that's another interesting point, right? Like, is why my paint buckets. What I started to find there is I was bouncing across multiple. As I built efficiencies, I also created in some cases more inefficiencies, right? And so, meaning I had to bounce across different platforms. I had to have my email open. I had to have a spreadsheet open. I had to have my my cloud, my cloud storage open. What else? I had to have templates open. And so I started to, then I had to track all this, on another spreadsheet. And so at any given time, I think I had like, one time I stopped. I was like, oh my God, I think I've got like 6, 7 different applications open. And then now I'm like, in the middle, we call it tumbleweed. I'm tumbleweed. Like, I don't know, what was I doing? What am I doing? Now I'm starting to write it in my notebook because I'm losing track. And so I was like, okay, I've got to pull this all together, right? I have to integrate supply ordering. I have to integrate the the project management, or sorry, the project information side of it. I have to integrate, the EPOs, extra purchase orders into it. And so, internally, that's how we integrate, right? I started to pull together all the different aspects that were, the 80%, if you will, that was, or sorry, the 20% that was giving me the 80% of my value day to day. We pulled that all together. Now, again, that's internally. When you start to talk externally, I think that's kind of what the question you're asking me is, where do we go from here, right? So, now that we can move, now that I and other painters can move faster than the suppliers, and in some cases move faster than the construction, their process, we have to integrate. I mean, that's just the next step.
You just do. I mean, you can't take, in my opinion, a specialized platform like this and negate, even the, I'll say they're almost systemic apps that we all use every day, no matter what you're doing, right? I mean, you need some sort of documentation ability, whether that's Google Docs or whether that's Word or whether that's your notepad. The other thing I want to know is, because you are the last mile, is there an ability for My Paint Buckets to be able to allow digital sign off and that kind of a thing? Once, is that something fluid with your platform?
So if I could ask a dumb question, when you say digital sign off, can you just elaborate a little more? What do you mean?
They would just same thing when a courier comes to your door and you have to sign X, that there's been a recipient of the supply.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. Super great question. And we do have that in there. That's, it's I think our pre-show conversation, right? Being able to lean forward into, the future, but in our case, we definitely want to do that without leaning too far forward enough to where we're not delivering immediate value to, more importantly, the trade partners, right? I mean, that's where we're focused. There's a lot of exceptional construction tech out there. I would debate at the macro level, but like I said, our focus, that last mile, that micro level. So to your question though, is yes, we do have that built into our software at the supply level, meaning, it's important to me, I, as a painter, former painter / business owner, I need to know if my materials are there. Cause there are times, right? Like if my materials showed up early and I wasn't there on time, then I run the risk of theft. And so if I can see a picture, another interesting story that I can't tell you how many times where, I've called and said, hey, where's my materials? And they're like, it's on the job site. And I'm like, I'm at the job site. I don't see it. Where are they? And the great, the suppliers will go that extra mile, no pun intended, of hiding the materials. And so now you start walking through this 3,000 square foot house looking for, 80 gallons of paint. And you're like, listen, I can't find it. Where is it? Can you show me? Because they'll take a picture, right? And most of the delivery dudes will take a picture, but it's on their phone. I can't tell. So all of this is inefficient, right? It all creates time, and time is money. And so when I finally get that picture, maybe 60 minutes later, I find out that it was actually at the house next door, or at the project, down the street, or at the wrong site. And so, to your point, though, we do have that built in on the ordering management side. That is something. Another interesting piece is like on our warranty side.
So sorry, I want to stop you for a second. So walk us through how you've changed that, because also, the purpose of these conversations is for us to really kind of leave our audience with a real clear understanding. Let's use that as a case. So what changed? So, now that you fixed that problem, how does that look in terms of how your app operates? Take us through the steps of what that would be applied using your app.
Just to cage the use case, then we want to talk like from project creation to like task completion.
Yeah.
Or
no, we just want to talk about, so what happens? What part of your app is being implemented or applied when that supplier gets to the site and he hides the paint, and the painter can't find where the hell he hid it?
Yeah, so that's our order management, right? And so we saw a piece of that. It all stems from that foundational cover sheet, but that's the full digital process of, the painter being able to create and then apply their paint orders to a specific task. And then as that task, or excuse me, as that paint order is then sent out, then it becomes part of the vendor management ecosystem. And so they're able to manage that paint order. And again, keeping it to, less than 3 clicks, they're able to manage it and communicate back to the painter of when that order is complete and ready and out for delivery. And as that happens, and as those pictures are uploaded, it all stems right from that cover sheet. Is the painters log in and they're able to see all that as those notifications come in, they're able to see firsthand, those images of where the materials are.
Are there any other last mile issues like that? That's a great one, because it would seem so common to me, right? You can't find the receiver, but you've got to get on, the supplier's got to get on with their other deliveries. So,
Sure.
here's your paint, I'm out of here. What other, because you do specialize in the last mile. So can you give us other examples?
Yeah. So let me see here. I'll share this. Share this one. But in short, yes, Stephanie, there's that last mile is always chock full of fun opportunities if you're just open to finding them. So to your point, following the money, that was kind of the third problem set that Joe and I started to look at, right? And so in that last mile, extra purchase orders, change orders, depending on your industry, especially new residential construction, can become a huge problem set, both on the administrational side, as well as the collection side, as well as the capture side. And so what Joe and I did is we went through and said, okay, let me start with how we previously did it. So the way I previously collected an EPO, and just for the user, or for the audience, like, what is an extra purchase order in new residential construction? It's something being accomplished outside the contractual agreement prior to the closing of a home. So meaning someone, before the home was closed, drywall is up, someone punched a hole in the drywall needs to get repaired. So, drywall comes in, repairs it, painters come in, repair it. So I would give a cost now to the GC or that home builder saying, here's that invoice and what I expect to be paid for that. So how did that work previously? Once again, drawing on Pops' experience, it all stemmed from a yellow ledger. And so what he would do is every day at like 5:30, he'd start to make his phone calls and start calling all of the subcontractors and say, did you have EPOs today? If so, how much? And there was some, digital dickering, there was some dickering that happened. And so the point there is he would write it all down, and then he would call his partner, and then the partner would collect and invoice him, and then send the emails out to the respective people. And so that kind of maintained for a while until I was like, oh my gosh, no, like this is crazy, because, I know specifically as I started to try to manage that process using spreadsheets, it's just, I'm leaving money on the table. I know my subcontractors are leaving money on the table. And then at the end of the day, it's just wildly inefficient, because it's not only am I leaving money on the table, I'm losing money because as I try to track all this, I know I'm not collecting all of them. So I digress. What does that mean? Because we digitized it. So these are just some fictitious ones that we created. Okay, good. There's no silly pictures in there, because software engineers have a fantastic sense of humor. So I probably should have vetted. I should have vetted that EPO before opening, but we're good. Anyway, what does this mean? So let me walk you through I'm just trying to think if there's an easy, I don't think there's an easy way for me to demonstrate this, but like what I'll do is try to communicate. What we wanted to do is that process that I just explained, we wanted to respect that, meaning we wanted to respect relationships that contractors have with their subcontractors, and how that, that process works. And so first and foremost is the foundation of our that relationship logic that we have in My Paint Buckets respects that. So we give users the ability to manage how much power that they want to give to, for example, an employee, and a supervisor and a subcontractor. Meaning some paint companies, they have supervisors that they trust to manage some of their financials, and some of them don't. And so what does that mean is supervisors and the company owner have the ability to tailor their responsibilities. Vice versa. Subcontractors, as they create these EPOs and submit, they only, like, let me see here, let me back up slightly. If we back up and look at the EPOs, this is from an enterprise user account view, meaning all of these would be fictitious subcontractors being sent to me, right? So I see everything in my enterprise. If I was to log in under a subcontractor role, I would only see what I'm submitting to that contractor. And so you're able to, or again, going back to organizing of information.
Yeah,
right, exactly. Protecting, protecting the information. So that was important for us. So now it becomes an interesting, we've had this feature out now for about 12, 16 months. And now what we're doing is it's a nudge in culture, meaning as I described, it's at the end of the day I'm calling. Now the case is I don't want to call you. What I need you to do is your first step walking to a job site should be walking your home, right? Walk the house, see if there are billable items. And if so, it's as simple as tap, and then you select who you're working for. Let me see if I can do one real quick. Yeah, okay. Sorry, the logic ties back to a project site, but it's as simple as that 3-step wizard. What project am I working on? I am a subcontractor, right? So I might be working for multiple agencies. So we kept that logic clean and clear, meaning if you have multiple contractors that you're working for and they're in the My Paint Buckets ecosystem, we made sure to allow that subcontractor to select who you're working for. And then it's as simple as being able to create the cost. And this one doesn't have it in there, so I apologize, but there would be a cost associated with it. And so is now going back to the enterprise user view, is I would see their cost. They would also have a unique invoice that is attached to that. So now we're reducing the administrational burdens on that subcontractor. So as they submit the EPO to us, it creates the invoice for them. I'm now able to do that now digital dickering with my subcontractor. So if we agree on that price, then I would accept it or put whatever price that I'm going to invoice to the builder. And then after I would approve that, I would get my own unique invoice that I would submit to the home builder. And then the last piece of it is now what does that mean is if we go back to the original process at whole, it took me, I think if I had a great subcontractor who gave me EPOs daily, and I was able to put them into a spreadsheet and then get my email out on time, I think moving fast, I could probably do all of what we just did in maybe 7 to 10 days, right? Because again, the goal there is I want to get that into the GC's hands so they could start determining whether or not we're aligned in price and scope of work. Now we've got it down to minutes. So I could have a EPO in my GC's or construction manager's hands by 5 minutes after he talked to me, and that's important, right? It's incredibly important because the longer that time. Well, it's more than that though. As the time starts to grow between me having a face-to-face conversation with a construction manager about hey, they punched a hole in the drywall. Are you good with $150? Yeah, that sounds fair. If I don't get that to him in a reasonable amount of time, he's having to manage other projects, and so he's gonna that gap, the likelihood of me getting paid that $150 or whatever, especially on big EPOs, right? If the higher the dollar amount, the more likely I'm not going to get paid, which means the more likely my subcontractor is not going to get paid. And so it was important for us to be able to get this invoice into the GC's hands as quickly as possible. Now, that's another, that's an air gap. GC's now it's in their hands. They're executing their processes, but now I'm able to pivot to taking that time gained and saying, please pay, please pay. Once I collect, now it's back in my hands. And so that to your point, now what does that create is now we can actually pay in platform. And that's very important. That was very incredibly important to me because that's where you build trust with your subcontractors, in my opinion. If I can pay my subcontractors faster than the other person, then I know they're going to be more loyal to me and hopefully stick to working with me and honestly just deliver a higher quality service to me. So we've integrated, to your point, what have we integrated with? We've integrated with Stripe. And so now it's as simple as, once I know I've been, either I can wait to when I've collected, or if in most cases, if I've got the costs and it's important for me to keep that subcontractor, as soon as they submit the EPOIs, I can just pay in platform. And it's that simple.
Wow. Wow. There's a lot of things you solve for in your demonstration and all that you talked about. To me, jobs dissatisfaction, not being able to find the right people for the right job. It all comes back to how is each relationship serving each other. And
Exactly.
It certainly looks like you've designed this platform to keep that in mind. So where can people contact you to have a more thorough demo and keep their conversation going with you?
Sure. LinkedIn is probably the easiest. I'd like to think that I set up my LinkedIn to make it super easy to get in contact with me. Excuse me. So my profile will either give you direct access to our website. If not, you can send me a private message on LinkedIn. If you do go to our website, though, there are some options there that will allow you to get in contact with me and Joe. So I'd start there. And if not, I'll drop my email in the comments when we're done here, my direct email. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I think that's the easiest place right there is LinkedIn or from mypaintbuckets.com.
Terrific. Terrific. And one last question to wind us up here. If My Paint Buckets had a mascot, what mascot would that be?
Man, this another awesome question. So I don't know what Joe would say, because I would think I would absolutely lump Joe into this conversation. But without him, I'm just going to go with our common ground was the Air Force, right? And so that's near and dear to me. So what is the Air Force mascot? I'm gonna steal theirs and go with the Falcon. That was the Air Force Academy and the Falcons. But it's an awesome bird. So I'd probably go with the Falcons, and that's the reason.
There goes the penguin. There goes the penguin.
Yeah, penguin. Awesome bird, but not cooler than the Falcon.
We're gonna wind it up here. I want to thank you very much, Chris, for coming on and taking the time and doing a deep dive and letting the people know what we're doing for painters. Power to the painters. Thanks everybody for standing by and listening in. Sometimes the comments work here, sometimes they don't, I find. So if there's something that you've said or you have a question, of course, we'll be checking back at the comments after we close down today. But let's all keep the conversation going. We really appreciate everybody's participation. And again, I'm Stephanie Brown from Intelligent Construction Opportunities. We're here to help you source, select, and implement the technologies like My Paint Buckets and work with the good guys out there trying to solve today's problems like Chris is with his partner, Joe. And that's a wrap.